Hello and welcome to the Faces of Africa Pocket Edition, where we dissect and discuss the topics covered in our weekly documentary show, which takes you through the continent's history, cultures, and major issues through exploring great personalities. This week on Faces of Africa podcast, we're talking about an interesting topic about the Rastafarians. My name is Fathiya Mohammed Noor, and I have here
Daniel Furnad.
Hi, Daniel.
It's great to be back, Fathiya.
It is definitely good to have you back. Last week I had Ashley, so it's really exciting to have you here. Of course, an interesting documentary we have this week on the Rastafarians, but not everybody knows who the Rastafarians are. We know what reggae music is, but tell us about the Rastafarians.
So I got interested in reggae music when I was a teenager.
Right.
And living in New York, a New York radio station started to play a song that Peter Tosh did with Mick Jagger. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know how reggae was related to the Rastafarian religion for the first few years that I was listening to it. Mm-hmm. And as I listened to the lyrics, I realized that this was a bit different. This wasn't all love songs or protest songs. This was a lot of songs about unity, about African pride, about God, about their religion. Mm-hmm. And so when I got a little bit more into it, I thought, I really need to know more about this. And when Faces of Africa gave me the opportunity to pursue this and go to Ethiopia, where the Rastafarians had returned,
right.
It was just a fantastic opportunity to delve more into who they are.
Yeah.
So who they are is they're Africans. It started from Africans that went to the Western world as slaves.
So Daniel, clearly we can tell your age by, you telling us Peter Tosh and Mick Jagger on the radio in New York. Yeah, when you talk about reggae, I only know of Bob Marley. Okay. Mm-hmm. But you've connected it with Ethiopia. Let's talk about how the Ethiopians interlink with the Rastafarians.
Yeah, so Haile Selassie visited Jamaica in the 1960s, and he had such an incredible welcoming. I mean, it was like 100,000 people at the airport. Mm-hmm. You'll see this in the documentary, the
it's
footage.
Really nice.
It's amazing that archive footage. But he came away feeling like the Rastafarians, the people that wanted to unite Africa and return Africa, needed a homeland. Mm-hmm. So he deeded them land in Shashemene in Ethiopia, a little bit south of Addis Ababa, and encouraged them to come start businesses, come back and try to unite their continent.
Right.
And that's how Ethiopia got connected to the movement.
Actually, when you watch the documentary, they talk about even the term Rastafarians, it comes from, I think it was his name, Haile Selassie, Rastafar, right? And so you see that people are really looking at some of the policies and the ideologies that Haile Selassie had. And so when he went to Jamaica, they would resonate with him. And the fact that, people came from other parts of the world and coming to Ethiopia and connecting with the Rastafarian religion tells you a lot about the continent, right?
Well, I think you find that through the voices of a lot of the characters in the documentary, that their pride in Africa was aroused when they heard about these people that were going back to Africa from descendants of slaves, et cetera, and their joy when they got there and found out what it was like. But Haile Selassie was a great uniter. I mean, he started the AU is based in, or the African Union is based in Addis Ababa for a reason,
right? And
he put together Ethiopian Airlines basically to try to connect the continent so that people would share ideas and share their pride in being African.
Yeah, I mean, it's true when you look at some of the things that Ethiopia has done. Even where it is right now, it talks about a lot about the history of Africa as is and why people are coming down to it. But let's talk about reggae music. Honestly, when you hear reggae music, two things: Bob Marley and, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on the podcast, but the thing that they smoke up sometimes, and people might not actually take reggae music so seriously. But you talked about the messaging in reggae. Tell me more about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are different things coming from different artists, and I think we focus. People tend to focus a lot on Bob Marley, rightfully so. I think at the time that we did this documentary, he had the fifth most popular Facebook account of all musicians in the world.
Right. Wow.
I mean, he's been dead now 30 years, and he's still one of the most popular musicians.
Yeah.
And that messaging, a lot of it is to love one another. It's very much a mirroring of what Jesus Christ said and what Haile Selassie then repeated.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting also when you take a look at the documentary, this particular lady who, she had a life in Manchester, in the UK. And she comes down to Ethiopia, still in line with the Rastafarian religion. Also someone else from the States, another lady, and they're coming to put in the work and help the continent fix and, some form of solutions. Then don't you think the whole idea of Rastafarians and reggae has a bigger goal other than what people, perceive it to be?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Yeah, it's about uniting Africa. It's about not looking at each other as different tribes or different nations, but looking at each other as a race of people that can get together and do great things. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's a dream that Haile Selassie had. Yeah. It's a dream that a lot of the reggae artists picked up. And it's a dream a lot of not very famous people that are in this documentary really believe in. Yeah. And, where does it go from here? Well, I think the hope is that reggae music and the Rastafarian religion will keep this idea alive and spread it.
Actually, you've talked about reggae music, spreading. Even in the documentary, we see that you highlight countries like Togo and Zimbabwe where reggae music is used. Even in Kenya, we do see that. So that really shows the impact that it has had, What would be your advice maybe to anyone who's listening to this podcast when it comes to reggae music in terms of taking it in as a form of the right kind of messaging for the continent?
Yeah, I mean, I encourage people to listen, to people to get into it, to dance to it, to perform to it, and to spread it to your neighbors. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of different artists to listen to. And perhaps those of you that listen to this podcast or watch the documentary can suggest to us, that maybe we should do documentaries on Alpha Blondie.
Right.
Yeah, from Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or other reggae artists. I know there's a very favorite one in South Africa, Lucky Dube.
Yeah, the late Lucky Dube.
Boy, if there was popular demand for that, maybe I could go down there and do a documentary on Lucky Dube.
Yeah. I mean, again, it comes down to the kind of messaging reggae has had around the continent, and I think that's what we should keep at.
Well, I'll tell you, this was a really fun documentary to do. The Rastafarian people are very kind people. Mm-hmm. They're very loving of each other. Yeah. They're a terrific community to be around. I mean, they get together and listen to music and trade stories and dance. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'll see a lot of that in the documentary. You'll see just how much fun the community has together and how unity just leads to all kinds of positive things. It leads to these people having good business. It leads to them being trade leaders. It leads to them, integrating Ethiopians into their religion, into their community. Yeah. It's quite fun to spend some time with these people, and I got to do it in person.
I can imagine.
Hopefully, you and our audience will enjoy spending time with them during the documentary.
Another thing that I think we should mention, by the way, is the dreadlocks or the hair. Actually, there's a song that's quoted in the documentary. You don't have to have dreads to be Rasta, right? Yeah. So, did you get any particular history with regard to why they have the long dreads?
It's their pride in their hair, yeah. And the idea is that I think that a lot of people in Africa imitate Western hair. Yeah, a lot of people get wigs and extensions, et cetera, and I think the Rastafarians have always tried to send out a message of African pride. Right. And the idea is you can grow your hair as long as you want. I think the dreads are just a way they fashioned it to make it more comfortable.
Yeah. Wow, beautiful documentary. I'm highly encouraging people to watch. it's an interesting documentary.
Well, thank you so much, Fathiya. It was
yeah.
really fun to make, and it would be fun to hear from our audience
What they think on it.
as they watch it.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, Daniel.